Alright, kind of response video to the response videos to the response video to Pyro, something like that. So anyway, this one and all guy who I kind of like, he made a video, and so I will play parts of it, because parts were really kind of boring. And so we'll just get to the parts that have some meat to them.
Hey guys, this is an indirect response to Pyro. He made a video about a new interpretation he has of Inmendham's position, and I'm always for new interpretations and rephrasings. I think it gives a great diversity to the discussion.
Yeah, I suppose so, but it's part of what Pyro's reinterpretation. Again, we're going to keep tripping over these words. You know, using the word material instead of the word, you know, real or absolute or objective, or, you know, I just don't, you know, it's really going to get tough if we have to all have our own word for something, and then we all have to agree to accept each other's word as meaning what we think it means, you know, or something like that. I mean, it's just a little bit annoying, and we're still kind of tripping over that.
Pathways for future insights, and so I'm all for that. I think he has some good phrasings there. And I'm going to attach it to his video just for wider context. But I think that there was a central issue missed, that of Inmendham's main position, that of the zero-sum game model. And although I don't necessarily agree with the conclusions that Inmendham draws thereby, I think the raising of the issue is very important. Because
yeah, but I don't even know if there's conclusions that are drawn based on that model. I mean, the model is the conclusion. The conclusion is that if you perfect life, take out all the negatives, you've reached a zero sum. You've taken care of, you've cleaned up all the mess. But there isn't anything to do beyond that. So if you achieve the zero sum, in a way, you've undone life entirely anyway. Because you're still left with the fact that there's nothing to accomplish beyond satisfying need that doesn't need to exist. And, I mean, I've said that before, and I keep saying it, and you know, people just keep ignoring it. But really, I mean, to serve a need that doesn't need to exist is sort of the definition of waste.
We get complacent because you know, we're in the game of life, and we don't tend to naturally, I think, question the rules of the game.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, exactly. I don't think we tend to naturally. Yeah, we're not naturally objective. That's something you have to intellectually impose. And I could use an example. So I sort of thought of it before. I said, well, when did I start getting the idea of this objective thing? I remember when I was a kid, you know, 5 years old. There's a kid at school, and I sort of liked him, but he had wax in his ears, and it creeped me out. You know, I just couldn't be friends with him because he had wax in his ears. Now, you know, it was kind of a silly reason not to like somebody, and it bothered me that, you know, the fact is that, you know, I like this guy, but he's got wax in his ears. And I don't know if I got the concept of objective and just the fact, but I definitely was getting the concept of subjective, and that, well, how come it doesn't bother other people and it bothers me? And so I was sort of bothered by the fact that I was bothered and other people weren't bothered. And so I was getting that idea that bother was not necessarily a word that you could put in each person's head and it was the same. Where headache might be a little more, you know, everybody kind of knew what that was, or broken leg, or, you know, there was things that were common, and then there was just things that weren't so common. And that we had these preferences and attachments and desires and wants that weren't consistent from people to people. And somebody could want something I didn't want, and somebody could be revolted by something I wasn't revolted by.
That's what he's primarily doing, and I think that is a very not only valid question and position to have, but a very useful one to have. You always have to have that kind of nagging irritation of why are things the way they are? Can they be improved? Are the rules fair, etc.?
Yeah, I don't think you know, obviously, like I said, if you get to that zero sum, you don't have to have the nagging irritation anymore because you cleaned up all the messes. And you have, you know, optimized the relationship between, you know, desire and satisfaction to such a degree that you only have the bare minimum but is desire needed to create satisfaction. So whatever desire would exist would be benign desire that never turned into harsh deprivation or real substantial suffering, and something like that. But even that's going to get tricky, because the zero sum might require the complete elimination of all motivating dissatisfaction.
So just please allow another interpretation of the position, an economic interpretation.
Yeah, well, this is where I'm going to jump ahead because this gets a little tedious. You know, I really don't think it's a good example, a good metaphor. Economics is it's not as easy to define the pluses and the minuses in such a game. You know, a business does not have the same kind of. It not only has different productions and consumptions built into it. There's more than one kind of fuel. I mean, there's what it produces as a product. There's what it consumes in terms of what it costs the laborers. There's, you know, efficiency compared to other business models. So it's just not as clear a comparison. Not a good metaphor. So anyway, advanced further along here.
A in life, be. We just have one life. So I think we still have to honestly question this life and say what are its purposes, and is our input into it, whatever that input is. I'm not exactly sure what that input is.
But see, that's the thing. I mean, is it that complicated to define the equation? Let's look at it as if it was a machine. Whether it's a 19th century steam engine or whether it's a modern combustion engine. The point is you get work out of it, right? It does work, and so that's a positive. And then it consumes fuel, and fuel we'll say is a value. So that's the consumption end. And you just measure what you have to put into it, how much work you have to put into creating the fuel versus what you get as a product, the value of that. And so if you metaphor that to life, you can see that the fuel of life is this price we pay, the suffering, the deprivation, the dissatisfaction, the negative pain and emotions that human beings have to endure. That we could qualify as the fuel. That's what gets expended to produce. And then the production, weirdly, is essentially, you can describe it in two ways. The first part of the production is to actually eliminate how much fuel is consumed. So part of the production would be eliminating suffering or a negative. What else is there to produce? This illusion of satisfaction. Now that's the tough one to qualify, and I'm arguing that is just that. It's an illusion. That it's really made out of a negative disposition that we possess natively. We're natively possessed by negatives, and every time you extract a negative from us, you create in us the illusion of a positive because you've made us less negative. And so I would argue that something like an orgasm would be a temporary state of freedom from all negative. All negative is being extracted from you. Unfortunately, it refills rather quickly.
Input into it. Is it worthwhile? Does it promote some benefit? So I think
yeah, well, like I said, the benefit would be eliminating or preventing suffering, mitigating against it, and that's the catch, like I said, because eventually you'll just mitigate against all deprivation, and you'll kill all cause to run the machine.
These are very important questions that need to be raised. However, the basic problem I have with the conclusions that Inmendham draws is I'm willing to allow a zero-sum game model innocent.
Yeah, so am I. But I'm just saying I don't think it's a practical matter. Like I said, if the zero sum is perfection, that's the truth of it. Achieving the perfect balance is the zero sum. Now you no longer have a deprivation left over. You no longer have a remainder, or however you want to describe it. You've cleaned up the mess, so there's no mess possible anymore. There's lots of people who are going to argue with you and state quite clearly that you have to have the deprivation to have the illusion of positive. So you're going to have to create some artificial negative just to create an excuse to have the illusion of positive, so that you're still in a trap. And it's very difficult to perfect based on this instrument. And the instrument can't be fundamentally changed. I mean, that's why I point to our origins as the problem. We're based on a bad model, consumption and reproduction for no purpose.
In the way that it refers to a non-profit organization, I'm very willing to allow a non-profit organization to exist and to continue.
Well, like I said, I just think it's a bad metaphor.
But I think Inmendham uses the zero-sum game phrase and applies it wrongly, in that he conflates the financial foundation of the organization with the organization's purpose.
Well, again, we don't have any purpose beyond satisfying what are subjective desires, what are basically just addictions, which are in turn are just projections of value. So there's no real value that we're chasing, and we're clearly paying a price for the chase. So I just don't see why. I would argue that you have conflated the zero sum.
Organization can be a non-profit, but the goal of the organization is not a non-profit, is not to be non-profit. The goal is separate from its ability to run, or its the assets provided for its run.
Yeah, but like I say, comparing the efficiencies of these things is not a fair comparison. All you can do is be more efficient. But the fact that you're a non-profit just has to do with what you've decided is an acceptable price. So you could say, okay, here's a business, it's a non-profit, but the laborers are still only making $5 an hour. And that's the only way they can survive in the market. And so what if you have a non-profit, but you still haven't met a minimum standard of efficiency? You're still running inefficiently. The fact that you're not gleaning some extra to give to some rich man doesn't really change the equation that the model itself, the industry, is not producing enough value to justify the cost of production.
And in this way, I think you conflate the zero-sum game principle for life, which I think is objective, pretty much, blatantly obvious, and conflates that with a purpose of life and the life.
Well, like I said, the objective again is tricky. What is the objective? Does it have any real value, or is it completely a projection of value? I would argue that there's no evidence of any real value in survival. You have to do better than that. And there's no way you can make a positive is to correct the negative. That's the basic theory. The negative exists first. The positive is created by eliminating the negative, the impact of the negative. So anyway, good enough. We'll move on to the other guy. A little snarky bastard. Whatever. You know, he's got his little petty resentments, blah, 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 blah. So I don't know if we don't need to do the first 7 minutes of his video or something like that. Yeah, so we're just cutting around 7 minutes. It gets a little bit...
Yeah, his position, but like my recantation doesn't make it not so. It's like, you know, if Galileo was forced to recant the sun goes, the earth goes around the sun. I mean, yeah, if you're torturing me, if you're like peeling the skin off of my body.
All right, so now he's sees this real hardcore subjectivist junk, and so somebody made the argument to him, well, you're not going to be a subjectivist if I run a steel rod through your guts, okay? Because when you're experiencing the sensation of pain, you're going to know it's real. You're not going to have any doubt about the fact of whether or not you're really experiencing something negative. The negative is going to be written all over it. And he's saying that now we've created that thought experiment merely for the purpose of torturing him into